Welcome to our notes on linear equations, situations to tables to graphs. So we're going to go between all the representations for linear equations, and this is our number one, our very first set of notes for this unit. So before we talk about linear equations, I need to remind you all of a few things. For example, in math, a point is a location on a graph. So a point is a location on a graph. A point has an x first and then the y. Remember, x's are how far left or how far right the point has moved from the middle. If it's left, that's negative, and if it's right, it's positive. And then for the y, it's how far down it's gone from the middle or how far up. And if it's down, it's negative, and if it's up, it's positive. So a point is like this little tiny dot on a graph. However, when I'm talking about a graph, I'm not talking about this. Because this, with this line and that line and the x and the y, that's called a coordinate plane. Kind of like in painting, when you look at a blank white thing that you put paint on, it's not called a painting yet, it's called a canvas. And so in the same way, this is not a graph yet, it's just a coordinate plane. It's just the x and y axis that we put graphs onto. So it is the x and y axis that we put graphs onto. So then a graph itself is when there is a point or more than one point on the coordinate plane. So when there are points on the coordinate plane. So even if I add just one little dot here, it becomes a graph. If I add a line, it becomes a graph. Anything on a coordinate plane is the graph itself. So then in math, we have a few different ways to represent things. We have graphs, obviously, and we just talked about that. But we also have tables. This is a table right here. And what it is, it's a list of points. So like when you look here, if x is 0, y is 15, that is 1 point. So a table is a way to list points by separating the x and y. Because all the x's are on top on this table, and then all the y's are on bottom, but a top-bottom pair is 1 point. So 0, 15 is 1 point, 125 is its own point, so on and so forth. And finally, situations in math are real-life events that we just end up representing with tables or graphs or equations. So a situation in math is a real-life event that can be represented with math. So that's all the vocabulary words you need to know for this lesson. All right, I'm going to erase this. So we're going to start for how do we go from a table to a graph. This table happens to all be positive. So when you look at a graph like this, and this is my x's and these are my y's, this side are positive x's on the right, and on the left is negative x's. But we don't have any negative x's, so I don't need the left side. Then, for the y's, above the line's positive, below the line's negative. However, there's no negative y's either, so I don't need the bottom. So sometimes you can have a graph like this that's just the positive x's and the positive y's. So that's what we're going to make here. So this is going to be my 0, 0, because I'm not continuing it out. I'm just doing this upper corner where everything's positive. And then the up and down is my y-axis. The left and right is my x-axis. So when you do this, there's a few rules to graphing. For example, if I tell you that this first tick mark's 5, that means every tick mark on the y-axis is worth 5. So the next one has to be 10. Okay, so whatever you say from 0 to the first one is, that's your scale. That is how much you're making that tick mark worth. And each tick mark has to be worth the same on the y-axis. The x-axis can have a different scale. So what you do is first you say, well, how many tick marks do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12. But my x's, my biggest x I have is 9. So if I take the biggest x I have, divided by how many tick marks, 9 divided by 12, I get, I get 0.75. However, I don't need to make my scale a decimal like that. I think I'm going to round up a little bit to 1, because 1 makes the most sense to me. Because all I need to make sure is that I have enough so that I can get to 9. So going by ones would work, because I'll hit 9. So let's see, for my y-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. For my x-axis, I'm going to do the same thing. So I think it's 12 too. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. However, the biggest number on my y-axis is 105. So if I do 105 divided by the 12 tick marks I have, I get 8.75. So I'm going to round that up to 10. If you've never seen this symbol before, like the squigglies, it means about, like round. So I'm rounding up to 10, and I'm going to go by tens for my y's to make sure that I at least get to 105. I mean for my x's. Wow! Did you notice how I messed these all up? Okay. So, for my x's, if I count how many tick marks I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So, I want to make sure that I at least go up to 9, because my biggest x is 9. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my biggest x, 9, divide it by how many tick marks I have, 12. If I put that in the calculator, I get 0.75. However, I don't want to make my scale a decimal because that's difficult. So it's okay to round. I'm going to round up. This little symbol, the equal sign with the curly, it means to round. So that could be about 1. So if I go by ones, I'll at least hit 9. So I'll be good. So let's see. I'm going to go by ones for x. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then for my y's, if I count how many tick marks I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 as well. So I'm going to take my biggest y, which happens to be 105, and divide it by 12. I'm going to put that in a calculator. I get 8.75. Again, going by 8s isn't necessarily the best. It's okay to round to like 1s or 2s or 5s or 10s. So I'm going to round this one up to 10. Because I will at least get to 105. There'll be at least enough room. So, for my y's, go by 10, 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 90, 100, 110, 120. So to plot this point, 0, 15, what that means, this is 1 point right there. What that means is from my middle, my 0, 0 right here, my x is 0. I'm not going to go left or right at all. But the y is 15, meaning I'm going to go up 15. So this isn't a real point. This was just my 0, 0. But my first point is at 0. It's up at 15, which is about halfway between 10 and 20. You just have to take a good guess. For my next point, it says x is 1, meaning I'm going right 1 because it's positive 1. And my y is 25, so then I'm going to go up 25, which is right in between 20 and 30. Then it's 2 for x, so from the middle I'm going to go over 2, and then up to 35. So there's 30, and then halfway through the tick marks, 5 more. And then I have 3 and 45, so x right 3, and then up 10, 20, 30, 40, and then 5 is about halfway through that tick mark. 5, 65, so right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up 65, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Oop, it's 455, haha. So 50, and then, oh, I did, haha. So I was doing 565, but I accidentally skipped the 555. I'm going to go back and do that, or the 455. Whew. All right, and then we have 5 and 65, which I already did. 6 and 75, so over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 75, and then 7, 85, 8, 95, 9, 105. All right, so now that I have all my points, you can see it looks like it's kind of making a line. And I could probably assume that if I plugged in half, it would end up right between those 2 points in this line. So I'm going to connect my dots. However, it's very important to remember, when I say how many points are on this line, the answer is millions upon millions upon millions, because even though I only plotted these 9 points, between them, like even between these two, there's like millions of points. Because what the line is tons of points super close together. So technically there's a point right here, and a point right here, and a point right here, and right here. And there's like millions of them, millions upon millions, even just between those two. And the reason why we draw a line is why write a bunch of dots like this? Like why go when you can just connect your line and just make a line. But what a line represents is millions of points really close together, so close that it just looks like it's a line. So that is how you go from a table to a graph. Now we're going to go from a situation, a real life event, to making a table, to then creating our graph. So, this is our situation. It says on her first day of work, Uma checked her bank account and she only had $10. But after working for 5 days, she had $110. And after working for 9 days, she had $190. So in math, X usually represents time. So usually if you have time, like days, months, years, that's X. And Y is usually, not always, but it's usually amount. Like how much money do you have is the situation. Or how much candy, or how many rocks, or whatever the situation is, how tall are you, your height, your weight. All those things are going to be Y. Anything that's like an amount, how much you have, is usually your Y. So, remember, a graph up and down is Y, left and right is X. And so, let's go through this. On our first day, so that's 1 day, we went and checked her bank account and she only had $10. But after working for 5 days, she had $110. And after working for 9 days, she had $190. So from the word problem, I pulled out points by pulling out much time has passed and what her current amount is. So now I can graph those points. So remember this graph had 12 tick marks. So for the x's, it's only going to 9. So 9 divided by 12 was 0.75, but I can round that to 1. So for my x's, I'm just going to go by ones. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then for my y's, I go up to 190. So if I do 190 divided by 12 in a calculator, let's see, what do we get? We get 15.83. So I'm going to round this up to 20 and go by 20s for my y's to make sure I have enough. So going by 20s, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 40, 160, 180, 200, 220, 240. So, starting from 0, 0, my first point says x is 1, so that's right 1, and then up 10. My first tick mark is 20, so 10 is about halfway for that. Then my next one says 5, 110, so I'm going to go right 5, and then up 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and then halfway through that to get 110. And then finally, 9 tick marks to the right, and then up to 190, so 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, 180, and about halfway to get the 190. And now that I've plotted my points, I can connect them. If I had a ruler, it would be a perfect straight line, but I don't. And I suck at drawing. I should have hit that point, but it didn't. Maybe this one's going to be better. It's not straight at all. I'm so bad with lines. Connect. You get the point. I'm going to erase this now.